Thank you all very much for coming to this very special US Gamechangers session. We are delighted to be joined by the president of Showtime, David Nevins. This is the bit where David sits modestly and I run through his career. David is one of the most influential and successful TV executives in the US right now. Under him, Showtime has delivered, he's delivered a jaw-dropping number of hits, from Homeland and The Affair to Masters of Sex and Penny Dreadful. His upcoming slate boasts Billions with Paul Giamatti and Damian Lewis. It was the most talked about show of the LA screenings recently. And he has what is the most anticipated show in recent memory with the return of Twin Peaks. Throughout his career, David's consistently been responsible for big hits on TV, from West Wing to ER, Malcolm in the Middle, and Will and Grace. He's also no stranger to Scotland, having spent a year here at Glasgow University. Welcome back.
Glad to be back.
Thank you for coming, and maybe we talked about your career a bit there. Could you just give us some of the highlights? How did you get to be, what did you learn on the way to get to being a network boss?
Well, I will tell you that the year that I spent in Glasgow when I was in college was influential in that I fell in with a bunch of sort of hardcore film geeks at Glasgow University in Strathclyde, and I grew up on the East Coast in Washington, D.C., and hadn't really contemplated the idea that you could just go to Hollywood and see what happens. And these guys in Glasgow were you know, they would have given their right arm to be able to go to Los Angeles. And I realized, you know, I didn't have any immigration problems, so I could just drive there. And it was really in Glasgow that I sort of made that commitment. I'm going to drive out to California and see what happens, having never been to California before.
And you did that
when I never really left. I went back, graduated college, and I left, you know, within 3 weeks of graduating college, and arrived in Los Angeles promptly in time for there was a writer's strike, thinking, I don't really want to be a writer, so that shouldn't affect me. I didn't really understand the concept that writer's strike means Hollywood shuts down. But I would say the brief overview of my career, to answer the question, is you know, I spent the first sort of 5 or 6 years in the wilderness of PAing, actually in the early days of pay cable, making kind of late night softcore for HBO, back before pay cable was cool. And then I went to NBC for a stint, sort of mid-20s to mid-30s, you know, which was a really good time at NBC when we were doing shows like Will and Grace and ER and West Wing. And then I was a producer for 10 years. And as a producer, I was at Imagine Television with Brian Grazer and Ron Howard, and we made 24 and Friday Night Lights and Arrested Development and Parenthood, were our most notable shows. And it was a very good time, and I really loved being a producer, and did not think I would ever go back to being executive. Had turned down options, but Showtime sort of offered a unique opportunity to still sort of function like a producer,
yeah,
but, you know, have a network where I could make the kinds of shows that I like to make.
Who were the sort of key mentors along the way? Because I think you've spoken about John Wells before. And
yeah, definitely. I mean, I know I would consider John a mentor, but he, you know, taught me a lot. And some of the same producers I've gotten to work with over the years, like John Wells, like Jason Katims. But I would say, you know, my bosses at NBC were Warren Littlefield and Don Ohlmeyer. Learned a lot from Brian Grazer and Ron Howard, how to sort of be a creative producer, live a curious life, and
well, that was evident from you going up to Glasgow and then going to LA with nowhere to stay.
Yeah, exactly. You know, it's, you know, just the advantage of being born with the American passport. I could just drive there, and despite not having, never having been to California, not really knowing anybody. But you know, the great thing about this business, and I feel like it's definitely been true over the years in the television business in the U.S., and I think it's true here, is that there's a certain degree of there aren't really rules, there aren't paths. You know, you don't have to be, you know, the perfect education or anything. You know, go and you have an instinct for storytelling, and, you know, sort of you figure it out, you're going to get a shot.
That's probably pretty helpful and inspirational for the younger people in starting out their career. Go for it. Then you're head of Showtime. We've got an amazing reel. Do you want to say anything, or should we crack into it?
Well, yeah. This is just sort of a general overview of what Showtime programming is, and I think it's fairly well aligned with what Sky is doing, but it gives you some sense of the breadth of what we're doing.
Let's roll that. If your tape gets applause, that's a pretty good sign.
That's good. Well, you know, they're applauding that final line.
That's a great
They
final
like that
line
line from Damien.
So what makes a pitch stand out to you as a Showtime show? What's the common DNA? Because there's a lot of breadth there.
Right. I mean, what I'm looking for, I'll tell you some of the things I look for. You know, first of all, originality. There's a huge premium on originality. There's a lot of television. There's a lot of good television. So I'm always desperately trying to find something that nobody else is doing, like a little sliver of story territory or concept or narrative idea that isn't being done elsewhere. I'm looking for something to surprise me where I don't know where it's going. I don't, you know, that's not, I think we're so narratively sophisticated now, audiences are. We've seen so many stories, so big premium on just a little bit of surprising unexpectedness. I don't know where it's going in the first 3 seconds, the first 3 minutes of a pitch. I'm looking for depth of character, you know, kind of characters with complicated psychology, and hopefully relevance and entertainment value. I really, you know, I think sometimes we're premium, we can be a little fancy, so, but I try really hard not to use that for, you know, I don't want to be precious, I don't want to be twee, you know, I definitely still care about entertainment value.
I was going to say, that's a common theme for me, is they are all very into depth.
Right.
Absolutely.
When we're working, it's entertaining.
Front and center.
When it's not working, it's boring. So boring is the enemy of good television. I have some attention span issues. I'm trying. I try not to impose that on all of our shows, but you know, I don't want our shows ever to feel like work or medicine or this is good for you, or you know. I don't think that quality means it has to be hard to watch, or you have to take a deep bracing breath before you turn the television on.
And so is that, this is not necessarily a leading question, but is that why they're not HBO shows or AMC or Netflix shows? Or
you know, I will say the best of what I like on other networks. You know, but I try hard to find, you know, that right balance of entertainingness and relevance. Like, why does this show matter to me? What does this show say about the world that we live in? Hopefully, I think the best of the stuff we do feel like they have something to say about the world we live in right now. Homeland is like a deeply, I think, relevant show about, you know, about America's sort of how, you know, difficult place in a 21st century world, you know. Billions is about our complicated relationship with wealth, and we now have this sort of class of super rich and super wealthy, and how do we feel about that? What's fair, what's not fair? All our complicated feelings about wealth and capitalism, I think, get embodied within these two characters. Even Masters of Sex, which is, you know, a 50s, 60s set show, now a 60s set show, I think is still like very much about sex and gender in the 21st century world, even though it's set in a different era.
So saying something about the world is really important. You spoke about storytelling in different form. The Affair, it really obviously does tackle that as well, doesn't it?
Right. You know, I think there's a lot of ways to have originality, you know. The Affair is a very low concept show for, you know, Showtime made its name on high concept shows, a pot dealing mom, a serial killer of other serial killers. The Affair is just like two regular people who have a relationship or have an affair, it comes between two marriages. So not terribly novel in its concept, but I think very novel in its storytelling form. And I always like shows that play with the form. 24 was a show that was based in the original idea was more of a formal idea than it was a concept for a show. It was like, could you do a show in an entire season of a network show, which is 22 or 24 episodes over the course of one day, 24 hours. So it was concept before, it was form before narrative, before the story. And I think Affair was, that's what makes that show interesting. And it's going to play with it. And in season 2, it plays with it even more because you're actually going to deal with not just the point of view of the couple in the affair, but you're also going to deal with the point of view of the spouses of those people. And you're playing with time, the future tense and the present tense.
You said yesterday when you were in the John Logan session, that I think one of your notes back to John was that all TV is about family. Did you say that's true across your slate?
Yeah, I think that's sort of a truism that ongoing series television is about making an audience, making a relationship with the characters in their show, and it's about the relationships between the characters. And with John in particular, so I do think it's true across all shows, whether it's literally a family, or it's a work family, or it's colleagues, or it's, both Billions and the original, the beginning of Homeland started with two main characters in deep opposition to each other, so they weren't really family, but each character had family around them, and the same thing you'll find in Billions, where you've got two characters starting like this, pointed at each other, who really have very little relationship with each other, but they each have families around them, so there's a lot of different ways to play with that. But with Penny Dreadful, you've got all these characters with their own demons and their own problems and their own story trajectories, and I'm always pushing him to how do they relate to each other, because I do think the audience connects to a show through the relationships between the characters. Shows where your main characters are too atomized from each other, I think tend to be hard to watch.
So that's a good sense of the DNA, but what does success look like for you?
Success is some combination of buzz, owning a bit of the spotlight. I want shows that cause people to talk. I am not impervious to ratings. Sometimes people who are in the sort of subscription business say, I don't care about ratings, it's really all about subscribers. I do care about ratings. I think ratings are a mark of showmanship. I care about showmanship. I want to make shows that have impact. If nobody's watching, it's hard to have impact. But it's very amorphous. We're the one form of television where there's no revenue relationship. Ratings do not turn into revenue. There's no revenue directly tied to any show. It's the same thing with Sky. It's the same thing with the streaming services. Everybody else, I can put this show in this time slot and I can deliver this amount of advertising. So it's an interesting puzzle, but it's better to have shows that are watched than not watched.
Yeah. That translates often into they're going to subscribe, continue to subscribe, not churn out.
Right.
Are there any value sorts of measurements you use?
We're remarkably unscientific about it. And I keep, looking for some science, because I actually really like numbers. I come out of the creative side, but I'm a geek for numbers, and it's hard. But there's obviously in this era that we're in, when there's so much going on and so much noise and so much choice in the market, there's no substitute for passion. And one of my goals, I like to make shows that are going to get people to write off the TV pages. I was telling you this morning at breakfast. We pitched the New York Times on doing an article about food in Billions, because one of the things in Billions is it really fetishizes the great food of New York. Where do you get the best knish? Where do you get the best pizza? Where do you get the best soba noodles? And so I love a story like that. Let's put a story about Billions in the food section of the New York Times. That's amazing. That to me is a home run.
We're going to come on to Billions and show everyone a bit more of it soon. But before that, can I just ask you a bit about the culture of Showtime? So you've talked about risk taking. That's a big thing for you. You've also got quite a small team, which I think we've got a slide of your gang. How do you sort of energize those guys and embrace risk taking?
Yeah, these are the sort of program team, and I like individuals. I like people to bring their own subjectivity. I don't want to ever talk in the royal we. I think you're always in a creative situation. You're much better to say, I think this, or I feel this, or I didn't like that. And I used to, when I was a producer, I used to hate when networks would say, we are our brand, talk in terms of sort of corporate speak like that. Our brand doesn't like this, or the worst was referring to their boss. He doesn't like this, or she doesn't like that. I want everybody to sort of be their own person. I don't expect, the goal to me is idiosyncrasy, is individuality. I don't treat John Logan exactly the same way as I treat Sarah Treem, who does The Affair, and they each need different things, and I push them. I'm trying to make John the best of what John. I want John to be the best version of John Logan. I want to inspire him, and I want Sarah Treem to be the best version of where she's going, and I want executives to do the same thing. Speak from your heart, your life experience, your taste, your subjectivity. This is not about meeting some sort of abstract idea of Showtime-ness. It's like, what's interesting to you? So, it sounds like it's much more nuanced than saying just giving everybody creative freedom. Yeah, I mean, I believe I believe in deep engagement, and I think most creative people, I won't say all, some people want to be left alone, but the vast majority of people want feedback, and they want give and take, and I'm always very clear that it's their vision. I operate like a good producer, I hope, and I'm opinionated, but I don't have to win. When there's like John Logan, I don't agree, or I don't like, or and he's like, this matters to me. And it's like it's always going to be his tie goes to the creator.
Who doesn't want feedback?
Honestly, nobody. I mean, I don't know. I feel like if you're in a respectful way, it's not about winning. I don't know. I find most producers would rather have somebody who they can touch and feel with an opinion and an idea, rather than silence.
So, thinking about your development slate, at what stage do you think this just isn't working, we're going to kill it?
It's a good question. I mean, I just canceled Happyish.
Yeah.
Which was a show that went through.
Let's go into that then. What was the?
Was a show that went through a sort of long, somewhat tortured process. It originally starred Philip Seymour Hoffman, and he died tragically. We had a pilot that we loved, that he loved, and then he was excited to do the series. I'm sitting there with 4 or 5 more scripts that I really loved, and there was a lot of elements of the show that I really liked, and yet it was becoming clear that the souffle was just not quite rising, and the show wasn't really connecting, I saw sort of seeds of brilliance, but it felt like all the pieces weren't coming together, and there were. I don't know. It was an interesting one. I liked all the talent involved. I think a really interesting, unique voice in Shalom Auslander, Steve Coogan and Catherine Hahn, actors I love individually, and yet the whole thing, Bradley Whitford, the whole thing didn't quite come together. And it was a pretty open, honest, direct conversation with Shalom and Coogan and Catherine. Pretty direct, and it was like, it doesn't feel like the pieces are right, and, but I engage with people. It's not like, a call comes in one day, sorry, you're canceled, it was a sort of process that we're all sort of in together.
Right. So do you think that it's more likely that things would die after series 1 or series 10, 11 rather than middle ground?
No, I mean, I've done different things. The Borgias, we ended after 3 years. So I think every show, we try to make kind of handcrafted shows. Every show has its own natural endpoint. You try to get it right. Sometimes, I've been accused of going on too long with a couple shows, but try to find the right end. I tend to like shows, and I think you can sort of see it in some of the shows that we're doing now that reinvent themselves constantly. Penny Dreadful season 1, not the same as Penny Dreadful season 2, not going to be the same as Penny Dreadful season 3. Homeland, which by the way we have the world premiere, the trailer for this coming season, which we'll play in a while, which nobody's seen. It'll go public in the next 48 hours, but you guys will have the first view of it.
There you go. You spoil them.
I'm what do you call it? I'm teasing of what's coming up. Like before the commercial break, you got to tease, right?
It's a very Showtime way of producing
well, we don't
drama.
have commercials, but little showmanship. I want you to know what's coming up. Keep you hanging on my words. What was the question? Where were we going? Before I screwed it up with the commercial.
Forget it. We're going on too long. Which shows? Okay, let's cut to it then. Which shows did go on too long? Do you think any have gone on too long? Dexter?
Maybe. No. I thought Dexter actually, we got a lot of crap for the final episode. Yeah. It actually felt to me, I would defend it, it felt like the right architecture. There were just, I think there were things that whatever. I'm not going to talk about it. But I actually feel like Dexter didn't go on too long, and that the last season was a pretty interesting resolution of a lot of the issues in his life. And I thought Nurse Jackie had a great, proper ending. As a producer.
That hasn't gone out in the UK yet, so no spoilers.
Right. No, I think, but it was I think it was a very satisfying, appropriate, unexpected ending for that show that it deserved. Friday Night Lights had a great ending that we built to properly. Arrested Development, we never really got the ending that we were looking for. So endings are hard on these sort of long-running series.
Let's have a quick chat about awards. So you received 24 Emmy nominations this year. That's 8 out of 10 of your shows, and 9 Golden Globes, and Ruth Wilson and The Affair winning. Do you deliberately set out to? How important is winning awards?
That's a very good question. I'm skeptical of awards. I'm not supposed to say that. I'm supposed to say awards are really important to me.
He hasn't blown his head yet. It's okay. He's calm.
No, the awards, we're in the quality game. They're validation of quality. They're political in the same way. There's a bit of an arms race in terms of marketing for awards, which I'm sort of skeptical of. I would always much rather market the shows, the service, than spending money on a small group of people in order to try to, influence Emmy voters. But the fact that sort of, 9 of our 10, or last year 9 of our 10, this year 8 of our 10 shows, I think, the breadth of quality that we have, and I think that's important. I think our strength in the marketplace is sort of the breadth and depth of our shows, and awards can be a marker of that. As a producer, when I was a producer,
Do you want to get on that stage?
No, I was going to say, sometimes it helped me, sometimes it didn't. I tended to do, as a producer, the shows that got awards and not ratings. I would always take ratings over awards. Friday Night Lights, Arrested Development, these were awards-friendly shows that never got big ratings, but they've lived. So they're shows that still have, life and relevance.
But the mix is important to you.
But the mix is really important. And the other thing that's very helpful about awards, I will say, is actors know that they come on Showtime, they're going to get noticed. Yeah. The last, I think 3 years in a row, we've had more series actor nominations than any network or service. And so that's an important thing. It's
so important. It helps you attract top talent.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. Liev Schreiber and Lizzie Kaplan and Paul Giamatti and Damian Lewis, they know that they're going to get noticed if they do good work on a Showtime show, and so that's an important differentiator for us.
Well, if you look at your talent, you've got an amazing UK talent roster as well. Dominic West, Reece Wilson, Damian Lewis, Timothy Dalton. Is dipping into the UK talent pool sort of a must for you?
Well, yeah, I mean,
or are we just we're just the best?
Well, honestly, kind of. Yeah. I mean, sometimes I would love to, there are times where I'm dying to hire an American actor because but there's a great talent pool. There's great training of actors here. The ability to do flawless American accents. I mean, that was the funny thing with Damian Lewis when it came for Billions. He was, that first conversation with him, it's too soon after Homeland. I don't want, I'm not so dying to do another American television show. I don't want to do television. I've got all these feature opportunities. And I said, yeah, and I feel like it's too soon after Homeland for me to hire you. It feels like a little bit of a failure of creativity, but I know you're going to like this script, and I know you're going to be great, and it's so different than what you did in Homeland, and so we were like, it was that weird flirtation where we're both trying to reject each other, but we knew where it was going to end up, and it worked well.
I've got to say, it's worked brilliantly for you, and you've just set up the next VT or trailer perfectly. So can we just?
I asked, what is VT?
Yeah,
videotape. I think. Come on, guys, get with the 21st century.
Roll VT. There we go. 2 rounds of applause.
That's good. It show's going to be very fun to watch.
Emmy Award winner looks pretty good up there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell us about the pitch. How did that get from pitch to screen? What was it that you bought in the room?
I bought the themes in this case, actually. I thought, not dying to do a show about the finance business. So it's not that, but I think some of the ideas about class and wealth, new money, old money, how do we feel about it? What's fair, what's not fair? What's freedom? Like, what does money buy you? Does money buy you freedom? Does money buy you happiness? And those sorts of issues. And this is written by, it was sort of co-created by Koppelman, Brian Koppelman, David Levine, along with Andrew Ross Sorkin. Andrew Ross Sorkin is like a financial columnist for the New York Times, so we're one of the premier financial columnists in U.S. journalism. And Koppelman and Levine have written, they know how to write sort of like delicious, fun dialogue. They've written the Ocean's 11, Ocean's 12, they wrote Rounders, they've written a lot of Soderbergh movies and just have like a great feel for language. And I felt like very interesting show about 21st century masculinity.
Did Damien and Paul Giamatti come with it? Were they
No,
attached?
not at all.
You cast
not
them?
at all. Cast them both. You know, and actors have a good nose for sort of like good dialogue and good characters. And I had, you know, Giamatti had come off, you know, he's just a guy who's been picky and has had a, you know, an incredible career of, you know, one of the truly great American character actors. Damien was always sort of in the back of my mind because I know Damien and I feel like this is like closer. He's got that sort of charisma in person, and Brody was such like a
arrogant billionaire.
Yeah. No, but he's got swagger. And you know, Brody was such a shut down, nonverbal, damaged, submissive kind of character. I knew this was much closer to who he was, and you know, so.
Where do you see it going? How much is it's all done?
Well, they're probably shooting episode 5 right now. I've read through episode 10 of 12, and you know, you're watching the cat and mouse game, and each of those characters has their own demons, their own wants, and you watch them sort of intersect. And Maggie Sith, who's this wonderful actress who was in Sons of Anarchy, is sort of in between them. She works at, she's married to Giamatti. They have a very interesting marriage, and but she works at Damian Lewis's firm, and she holds a lot of the cards to what's really going on this season.
You have quite a lot of strong female roles, don't you? Homeland, but the diversity is a big thing here in the UK. It's on the agenda a lot. Where do you think you are on that?
We are. I think we've done very well with gender diversity. I have a number of female creators. We're getting close to probably 50-50 of our shows are, you know, Master Sex, run by a woman, Ray Donovan, created by a woman, Affair, created and run by a woman, Shameless, run by a woman. So we're fairly 50-50 gender-wise. I think in terms of reflecting the racial diversity of America, we've got a lot of work to do. We're piloting I don't know, have had some successes and some failures in that, and
it's definitely on your agenda.
It's definitely on our agenda, and you know, we actually, our subscribership, you know, we're in, you know, between 23 and 24 million homes. So that's roughly a quarter of U.S. homes. We have, our subscribership over-indexes Latino, over-indexes African American, and so it's an important part of our audience base. And you know, we've had success. You know, the network was founded in the old days of Showtime. We actually had a lot of really great African American shows and you know, early on, you know, to have gay shows. We had, you know, Queer as Folk, the American version, and the L Word. So we definitely have.
Yeah. And comment in House of Lies, for example, you've got
Yeah, and you know, and it gives, and that was a show that wasn't, you know, was ended up being cast with Don Cheadle, and sort of the that character being African American has given an interesting angle for that show to play, and it's made the show definitely richer than it would be probably and it's given another angle for comedy, conflict, you know. I think it's done interesting things, but there's a show that we're piloting right now, which I'm very excited about, which is about growing up young African American, south side of Chicago, and really interesting. Common is executive producing, really, you know, interesting writing team who are from that world, and it's got a lot of promise.
Well, but let's talk about comedy briefly. Why'd you bother with comedy? Aren't you like the Uber drama channel?
I think comedy is an important part of what we offer, and you know, as a consumer, it's what I want to watch.
Right.
You know, House of Lies, Episodes, those kinds of shows, I think contribute to the breadth and depth of what we offer. And, you know, that's one of the reasons why Happyish was frustrating, because I think it had a lot of really good elements, but I think it was hard for an audience to take. But we're definitely going hard at that. There's a show that I'm piloting right now about the early days of comedy in LA.
It's a Jim Carrey one.
Yeah, Jim Carrey producing, actually, called I'm Dying Up Here, about sort of the birth of the stand-up in LA, you know, around the Comedy Store, and it's got real dramatic elements to it, but it's a show about the pain of comedians.
Is it hard for you because comedy probably doesn't travel as well?
Yeah, I mean, I do think there's over the years, the defining show for both HBO and Showtime, the defining shows have been dramas, have been The Sopranos, Dexter, Homeland, Game of Thrones, and you know, but I think there's great pay cable comedy out there to be had, and I just think we haven't served it up in exactly the right way. I intend to find it.
Well, likewise. Okay, let's move on to documentaries. What's the role of documentary on Showtime?
The great thing about documentaries is, again, like, I think the art form of documentaries has never been healthier. You know, the kind of filmmaking that's done, documentaries have become far more populous, far more fun to watch compared to, you know, what was a television documentary 10 years ago. I think people are making interesting stuff. We do the right ones, they make news, they get written about.
Yeah.
We have, you know, we've been working forever on this Suge Knight documentary, which we're finally going to air in September. Antoine Fuqua, great feature film director, spent multiple interviews with Suge before he went back to jail. And it's really interesting. The Marlon Brando documentary is interesting because
It looks amazing.
Yeah, what's cool about it is he was an obsessive self-taper, and I'd heard rumor of his audio tapes from, you know, early, you know, home recording technology in the early 50s. He would record himself, self-hypnosis, preparation for roles, journaling, and I'd heard rumor of these tapes, and the executive of the estate is Mike Medavoy, and I said, like, what's going on? I think we can make an amazing documentary. And Stephen Riley, John Batzik produced it. Stephen Riley lives in London, great filmmaker, just sort of immersed himself in hundreds of hours and you kind of swimming around in Brando's mind for 100 minutes.
But that was absolutely something that just popped into your head one day and went, hang on.
No, I'd
connected the dots.
I'd heard rumor of these tapes, and you know, then I had to convince the estate that we could make it, and then, you know, find the right filmmaker to do it. And it ended up it's a fascinating documentary because it's not linear. I mean, the storytelling is linear, but it's not following his life. So you're listening to it, and the only one speaking is Brando, and he's got such a great voice and such an interesting mind, and you live. You're unclear, is this Marlon Brando from 1958 or 1992? And the only difference you can hear a little bit the quality of his voice. You know, that's young Marlon versus older Marlon, but goes really deep into his relationship with his mother, his relationship with his father, Stella Adler, his preparation for The Godfather. That's really interesting. That we're doing a documentary that's in production right now. Will air in the fall, towards the end of the run of Homeland, where every living CIA director went on camera for the Naudet brothers, who did that great documentary inside the burning towers of 9/11, and it's going to make news. There's a few things in it, all the stuff that has gone on in the last 50 years of the CIA, of torture, wiretap, and we get all the CIA directors on the record, and it's a pretty amazing.
That's a good segue
achievement.
into Homeland.
Look at you.
There we go.
Look at you. You got a future as a talk show host.
So it's the first show you put into development at Showtime, isn't it?
Yes.
Let's not wait anymore. Let's see the trailer. Woo! So you're off. This is season 5. You're off to Russia, featuring ISIS. Homeland humanizes both sides of the story, and is that going to be hard with ISIS?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, it's fundamentally set. It's Europe this time. We haven't, sort of been dealing only really only in the Muslim world so far, and it's Berlin, and it's dealing both. It's got a lot of different elements to it, and they all actually come together quite smartly. It's got a little bit of ISIS. It's dealing also between East and West, sort of, what's going on in Ukraine between Europe and Russia. It begins with a Snowden-type leak out of the CIA, which compromises U.S.-German relations. It's remarkably similar to things that have been going on the last several months.
Yeah.
And
but written before.
Some of it was written before. Some of the initial ideas were done before, and then adapted to make sure it reflects what's really going on right now. Germany is a place with the strictest privacy laws, which is why Laura Poitras lives in Berlin, and anyway, it deals with a lot of those. I don't want to say too much, but it deals with a lot of those elements. But Europe is a sort of crossroads. Berlin is a crossroads between Western Europe and Eastern Europe, and also as a crossroads between Europe and the Muslim world in the south.
Well, it looks amazing. We're running out of time fast. I'm going to try and zoom through some other things. So Penny Dreadful.
I'll answer fast. Fast answer.
What's it like working with John Logan?
John is a pleasure to work with. He's if anybody saw him yesterday, prolific writer, effortless writer, great sort of back and forth, and, really fun guy to engage with.
He spoke about how his writing it's a film, it's a 9-hour film for a series 3 maybe, and that he quite likes the idea of people binging it all in one go. But you've spoken about sort of tantric viewing.
Yeah, tantric television as a good counterpoint to sort of the binge. It does seem, he likes. There's still chapters.
Yeah.
Just a 9-hour arc, I think, is sort of boring. So you need some peaks and valleys in. Over the course of an hour, you need peaks and valleys, and I think it's also, it seems a little bit like a bullshit debate to me because, unless you're going to read a book in one sitting, how often does that happen?
Are you going to try to lift different release models, or is it going to be?
I mean, I may experiment in certain cases, but you still can only watch 1 hour at a time, 1 minute at a time. It's still a linear experience until we figure out a way to tell stories completely non-linearly. There's a beginning and an end, and some stop points.
And it takes a little
while
to make them.
In the way.
It takes a little while to make them as well.
Yes, so. and the other truism is you still have to wait a year between seasons anyway. So if you watch them over 13 weeks, 12 weeks, or 2 days, there's still a long wait for the next chapter.
So Penny's a co-production. What I think lots of people in the room would like to know is what would you look for in a co-production partner? The business, they want business.
You want to make sure that your creative goals are aligned and that you're basically more or less looking for the same things. And, of course, the story that feels like it's got relevance to both sides. That's the hardest thing. I feel like I need things that are going to feel like they're relevant to the American audience. You need things that are going to feel like they're relevant to the British audience, so that it feels natural. And Episodes has worked great that way, and Penny Dreadful has worked great that way.
Yeah.
Penny Dreadful is an interesting one because it really is so intrinsically British. But Americans don't realize that.
Is that because
they don't? Well, I think
because of the period setting and
I'm just saying like Frankenstein, Dorian Gray. Like they don't realize that these are they've been so embedded in American culture that Americans don't realize how British they are.
And also in that show, you've got some of the best British theatrical actors as well, which must be really nice to be able to get them a notice in America.
Yeah, no, it's the great luxury of filming here, and Simon Russell Beale, who's on stage all the time, probably on stage tonight, but work around his schedule, and John loves writing scenes for him and get him up to Dublin fast in between, on his days off from theater,
Now, the show we're going to have to ask you about Twin Peaks. I'm sure everyone in the room is incredibly excited, to say the least. Who approached who? How did it? I think was it the art in your office? You told me.
Yeah. Well, no. I mean, again, there was a rumor that they were toying with the idea of coming back, Lynch and Frost, and it was unclear to me how much was Frost, how much was Lynch, and I really wanted to, I think it was really important to have both of them and to make sure that David was going to direct the whole thing. And so a lot of it was me trying to sell them on why it would be a good experience at Showtime. And David said that he was motivated by some of the paintings, which actually are a wonderful artist, happens to be my sister-in-law. And there's a painting in my office of a bookshelf falling on a little girl. It's unclear whether she's kicking it off or it's falling, so it's a little bit, is it heroic that she's saving herself, or is it imminent doom? And he liked the sort of ambiguity of that. And no, it's great. And they're going to start momentarily, and they've written the whole thing.
Can you tell us
and David's
anything?
going to direct the whole thing. Here's what I'll say. I feel like it's satisfying. I feel like if you've watched the first round, it answers questions and it ends with, it's an incredible journey, but it ends with definitiveness, and it's just a great sort of exploration of those characters, and I think there's going to be some very fun new characters.
And you've spoken about the notes process not really being a notes process with him.
Yeah, I mean, David has and deserves sort of, it's his baby, it's his creation, and as long as he's doing the whole thing, he's going to do it his way. But that said, there's been kind of actually quite lovely engagement, but I think there's real clarity as to what they're trying to do.
I'm going to move on to the floor really quickly, but one last one from me, which is you've been promoted to CEO at Showtime from next year. How does that change what you're going to be doing?
What it means practically
Congratulations.
Oh, thank you so much. What it means practically is I have responsibility for the distribution. The making money side as well as the spending money side. I've always been on the,
the spending money is much easier, isn't it?
It's much easier, more fun.
Yeah.
But making money is interesting right now. So it is a really interesting time in the business, I think worldwide, to be doing this, because we're changing the whole way that we relate to our audience, and we're starting to distribute ourselves over the internet and getting closer to our customer base. I mean, I was saying to you, I really admire and somewhat envy a lot of the ways that you guys have control over your pipeline into the home. And we're getting closer. So that makes it very interesting.
Yeah, your OTT service will give you a lot of that, won't it?
Yes.
So let's, I know we're rapidly running out of time, so we go to the floor, and I think the technology has failed us, so it's hands up if you've got a question, and we'll try and get a mic.
Fire away, I want to answer questions.
And I can't see. One in the middle there. Thank you. Just, if we can't get it, there's the mic.
So where are you? Put your hand up.
There, hand up. Anyone else? I can see where you are, like.
Hello. You mentioned earlier that you have a kind of appetite for British acting talent. You can see that in all your shows. And I just wondered, is there the same appetite for British writing talent? And are there kind of any reservations or qualifications in terms of how you see British writing, anything that we do really well?
No, I mean, obviously, not obviously, but I mean, we have a ton of British writers on our shows. There's two English writers on Homeland, English on Penny Dreadful coming next season. So there are no qualifications, and a fair number of English writers writing American television. And there's been an interesting sort of the process of how television gets written, the American kind of staff system versus the British, one writer kind of more auteur system. Has been an interesting back and forth, and it feels like there's a little bit more staff writing going on in the UK. It's become a little more prevalent, and one voice writing the whole series is becoming more prevalent in the US. Every show of ours is done differently. Episodes is all written by a team, by David Crane and Jeffrey Cleric. Up until this point, every episode of Penny Dreadful written by John Logan, although he's experimenting with working with other writers. Homeland, The Affair, more staff written. So yeah, there tons of British, UK writers writing in the American.
Is there anything that the Brits are doing differently, or is it just you respond to the writing? Respond to the writing,
yeah. And I think I'm very interested in getting more, particularly on the comedy side.
Yeah. I
feel like there's opportunities.
Leave your scripts here.
Yep.
Any more? Anyone? What? Last one. Last one. That one at the back then.
Oh, hi. I just wondered how much flexibility you've got with slots, because like Netflix have just picked up Black Mirror. What's attractive is they've been able to say they can do it in 90s, they can do it 45s, they can have short run. There's quite a lot of flexibility there. Do you have any of that sort of flexibility available to you?
We do. I mean, because we don't sell advertising, we can play around with slots, so it's not like we're beholden to the hour and half-hour slots.
And shorter runs?
In shorter runs, yes, we can do shorter runs, and we're playing around. Different shows. John did 10 episodes last year. I'm talking about Penny Dreadful this year. As he really broke down the season, he said, "I think 9 is my number," and so we're doing 9 episodes this season. So yeah, we do. It's one of the advantages we have as well.
Fantastic. So no tweeting about the Homeland trailer. I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap up because we're running out of time. But David Nevins, thank you so much.
Thank you. It was really fun.